Felicity Pendleton's trembling hands clutched the crumpled ticket as the stagecoach disappeared in a cloud of dust, carrying with it her last hope of escape from the dying mining town of Silver Creek. The year was 1878, and the harsh Arizona Territory sun beat down mercilessly as tears streamed down her face, the bitter reality of being stranded setting in like a physical blow. "Looks like you could use a ride, madam." The deep voice startled her, and Felicity turned to find a tall figure atop a magnificent chestnut stallion. His face was partially shadowed by a worn leather hat, but she could make out kind eyes and a strong jawline dusted with stubble. He tipped his hat, revealing sun-bleached brown hair, and offered a gentle smile. "The name's Finnian Montgomery. Most folks call me Finn." Felicity hastily wiped her tears, embarrassed to be caught in such a vulnerable state. At 22, she had learned that showing weakness in the West was dangerous, especially for a woman alone. "Felicity Pendleton," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "And I don't make a habit of riding with strangers, Mr. Montgomery." His smile widened, revealing a small dimple in his right cheek. "Fair enough, Miss Pendleton, but that stage won't be back for a week, and Silver Creek ain't exactly flourishing with alternatives." Felicity glanced around the near-empty street. The once prosperous mining town had been dying a slow death since the silver veins ran dry. Most buildings stood abandoned, their windows like hollow eyes staring at the few souls too stubborn or too poor to leave. "Where were you headed?" Finn asked, dismounting with fluid grace that spoke of a lifetime in the saddle. "Tuxen," she admitted reluctantly. "I have a position waiting as a schoolteacher." "I'm headed south myself," he said, adjusting his leather vest. "Not all the way to Tuxen, but I could get you to Willow Springs. You'd find safe passage from there." Felicity studied him carefully. His clothes were dusty but well-maintained. The revolver at his hip was worn but clean, and his eyes a striking blue that reminded her of the desert sky just before dusk held no malice. Still, she'd heard too many stories of women who trusted too easily. "Why would you help me? You don't know me." Finn shrugged. "My ma raised me to believe a man's measured by how he treats those in need, and from where I'm standing, you look like you could use a friend right about now." A gust of wind swept through the street, carrying the scent of sage and dust. The stagecoach was long gone, and with it, the $70 she'd saved for 3 years' money she couldn't afford to lose. "The driver refused to wait," she explained, her voice catching. "My trunk wasn't loaded yet, and he said they were already behind schedule. I asked for just 5 more minutes." "Jasper Wells never did have much patience," Finn said with a frown. "Or decency. You know him. Everyone between here and Santa Fe knows Jasper. Man values schedules over people." He gestured to her lone carpetbag. "That all you got?" Felicity nodded, clutching the bag tighter. It contained everything she owned in the world now: 2 dresses, a nightgown, a brush, and a weathered copy of Pride and Prejudice that had belonged to her mother. "My trunk contained everything else. My teaching materials, my mother's silver hairbrush, all my savings." The reality of her situation hit her again, and she blinked back fresh tears. Finn's expression softened. "We might be able to catch up to them if you're willing to ride hard. Jasper takes the main trail, but I know a shortcut through Apache Pass." "Apache Pass?" Felicity echoed, her heart racing. "Isn't that dangerous?" "Not if you know the land and respect its people," Finn said. "I've traded with the Apache for years. They know me." Felicity hesitated. The sensible part of her screamed that getting on a horse with a stranger was foolhardy at best, suicidal at worst. But her alternatives were grim. Stay in a ghost town with no money and no prospects, or trust this man. "You said your mother raised you right," she said finally. "Where is she now?" A shadow crossed his face. "Buried in Missouri. Cholera took her and my pa when I was 16. "I'm sorry," Felicity said softly. "My parents are gone too. Father to the war, mother to grief shortly after." Something passed between them, then a shared understanding of loss that transcended words. Finn nodded, acknowledging the bond without needing to speak it. "You still haven't answered my question, Mr. Montgomery," Felicity said. "Why help me?" Finn reached out to stroke his horse's neck. "Maybe I've been riding alone too long. Or maybe seeing a lady in distress awakened what little chivalry I've got left." His eyes met hers directly. "Or maybe I just think everyone deserves a second chance when life deals them a bad hand." The honesty in his voice was what finally convinced her. Felicity took a deep breath and made her decision. "Very well, Mr. Montgomery, I accept your offer." Finn's smile returned. "Good choice, Miss Pendleton." He offered his hand. "Ride with me." Felicity placed her gloved hand in his, feeling the strength and calluses beneath the leather. "I suppose I will." With surprising gentleness, Finn helped her onto the saddle before mounting behind her. The proximity made her stiffen initially, but as they set off down the dusty street, she found herself grateful for the solid presence at her back. "Hold tight," he advised as they left the town behind. "We've got ground to cover if we're going to catch that stage." As the horse settled into a steady gallop, Felicity found herself clinging to the saddle horn, the wind whipping loose strands of her honey-blonde hair. She had no way of knowing if trusting Finnian Montgomery would prove to be the best decision of her life or her last mistake. But as Silver Creek faded into the distance, she felt something unexpected stir within her, not just hope, but a flicker of excitement at the unknown road ahead. The sun climbed higher as they rode, casting sharp shadows across the rugged landscape. Felicity had never ridden this fast before, and despite her precarious situation, she found herself exhilarated by the speed and freedom. "Have you been in Arizona territory long?" Finn asked, his voice close to her ear to be heard over the thundering hooves. 2 years, she replied. "I came west after my aunt died. She was my last living relative in Boston." "Boston." There was a note of surprise in his voice. "That's quite a journey for a young woman alone." Felicity smiled wryly, though he couldn't see it. "I wasn't entirely alone. I traveled with the Winslow family as their children's governess. They settled in Silver Creek when Mr. Winslow thought he'd make his fortune in silver. Let me guess, they left when the mine dried up." 3 months ago, she confirmed. "They were kind enough to pay my wages before departing, but not kind enough to take you with them," Finn finished. "They were returning east. I have nothing left there." They fell silent as the horse navigated a rocky incline. Finn guided the animal with expert precision, his body moving in perfect harmony with the horse's gait. Felicity couldn't help but admire his skill. "What about you?" she asked when the terrain smoothed out again. "You seem at home in the saddle." "Been riding since before I could walk," he replied. "My pa ran a small horse ranch outside Springfield. After he and Ma passed, I drifted west, found work as a scout, then started carrying mail for settlements too small for regular postal routes." A mail carrier. The profession surprised her. She'd expected him to say cowboy or perhaps even gunslinger, given his weathered appearance. "Among other things," he said vaguely. "People out here need all sorts of services. I deliver mail, medicines, sometimes news from loved ones. Occasionally I guide travelers or help track lost cattle." "A man of many talents," Felicity observed. "Jack of all trades, master of none," he replied with a self-deprecating chuckle. "Except maybe riding and shooting straight." They continued at a brisk pace for another hour before Finn guided his horse off the main trail and into a narrow canyon. The temperature dropped immediately in the shadow of the towering rock walls. "We'll water the horse here," he explained, dismounting and helping Felicity down. Her legs felt wobbly after the long ride, and she stumbled slightly against him. His hand steadied her at the waist, lingering perhaps a moment longer than necessary before he released her. "Thank you," she murmured, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the desert heat. Finn led the horse to a small spring bubbling from the canyon wall. "We're making good time. The stage has to take the long way around these mountains. If we cut through Apache Pass, we should intercept them by sunset." Felicity removed her bonnet, fanning herself with it. "Do you truly believe we can catch them?" "I do." He filled a canteen and offered it to her. "Drink. The desert takes moisture faster than you realize." She accepted gratefully, taking several long swallows of the cool water. "You mentioned the Apache. Are you certain they won't object to our presence?" Finn's expression grew serious. "Nothing's certain in Apache territory. But I've dealt fairly with Chief Nature's band for years. I speak enough of their language to get by, and I've never broken my word to them." "You speak Apache?" Felicity couldn't hide her surprise. "Enough to trade and to apologize for trespassing," he said with a small smile. "Which is what we'll be doing. We're cutting through their hunting grounds, not their camp." Felicity nodded, trying to process everything. Just that morning, she had been preparing to leave Silver Creek forever, to start a new life as a proper schoolteacher in Tuxen. Now she was rushing through the wilderness with a man she barely knew, about to enter territory most white settlers avoided at all costs. "You're brave, Miss Pendleton," Finn observed, as if reading her thoughts. She laughed softly. "Not brave. Desperate, perhaps." "There's a fine line between the two," he replied, retrieving some jerky from his saddlebag and offering her a piece. "Often the bravest acts come from having no other choice." They ate in companionable silence, the only sounds the soft nickering of the horse and the whisper of wind through the canyon. Felicity studied Finn covertly as he checked his horse's hooves. He moved with confidence but without arrogance, his actions efficient and purposeful. She guessed him to be around 28, though the sun had weathered his skin, making him appear older at first glance. "How did you end up in Silver Creek today?" she asked suddenly. "It's hardly on the way to anywhere," Finn straightened, dusting off his hands. "Delivering a letter to old Doc Simmons, a reply from his daughter in San Francisco. The doctor left 2 weeks ago," Felicity informed him. "After Mrs. Gardner died in childbirth, there wasn't enough work to keep him." Finn frowned. "No doctor in Silver Creek now," she shook her head. "No doctor, no school, barely a general store. The saloon's the only business still thriving." "That's a shame," he said quietly. "Was a decent town once." "It was," she agreed, remembering her first days there when the streets bustled with miners and merchants. "But that's the way of these boom towns, isn't it? Fortune turns and people follow." "Not everyone has that luxury," Finn observed, his gaze searching her face. Felicity looked away, uncomfortable with his perception. "We should continue, shouldn't we, if we're to catch the stage?" He nodded, helping her remount before swinging up behind her. This time, Felicity was more aware of his proximity, the solid warmth of his chest against her back, the strength in the arms that reached around her to take the reins. It had been a long time since she'd been this close to a man, and never one like Finnian Montgomery, with his quiet confidence and weathered charm. They emerged from the canyon into a landscape of red rock and sparse vegetation. In the distance, purple mountains shimmered in the afternoon heat. "Apache Pass is through those foothills," Finn explained, pointing to a gap in the distant range. "It'll save us nearly 3 hours compared to the stagecoach route." As they rode, Felicity found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse's gait and the unexpected intimacy of their shared journey. Finn told her stories of his travels, of the characters he'd met, and the sights he'd seen across the vast western territories. She shared tales of her own journey west and her dreams of building a school where children of all backgrounds could learn together. "That's a fine ambition," Finn said when she finished describing her vision. "The territories need more people like you, Miss Pendleton. People who see beyond just surviving to building something better." "Felicity," she said impulsively, "if we're to be traveling companions, you might as well use my given name." She felt rather than saw his smile. "Felicity it is, then, and I'm Finn to my friends." "Are we friends, Mr. Montgomery?" she asked lightly. "I'd like to think we're getting there," he replied, his voice warm with amusement. "Though I typically don't hug my friends quite this close for hours on end." Felicity laughed despite herself, the sound echoing across the empty landscape. It struck her, then, how long it had been since she'd laughed freely, without restraint. Something about Finn and this wild journey had loosened the careful composure she'd maintained since leaving Boston. As they approached the foothills, Finn grew more alert, his posture straightening. "We're entering Apache territory now," he said quietly. "If we encounter any warriors, let me do the talking, and whatever happens, don't show fear." "Is that likely?" Felicity asked, unable to keep a tremor from her voice. "Not likely, but possible. The Apache are fighting for their survival. They have reason to distrust white faces." They entered the pass, a narrow corridor between towering rocks that blocked the harsh sunlight. The temperature was cooler here, and Felicity pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders. The passage twisted and turned, sometimes so narrow that Finn had to guide the horse carefully to avoid scraping against the stone walls. They had traveled perhaps 20 minutes through the pass, when Finn suddenly reined the horse to a stop. Felicity opened her mouth to question him, but he placed a warning hand on her arm. That's when she saw them, 3 mounted figures blocking the path ahead, their faces painted for war. "Apache," Finn whispered. "Don't move." He slowly raised his right hand, palm outward in a gesture of peace, and spoke several words in a language Felicity didn't understand. The warriors remained impassive, their dark eyes evaluating the intruders. The tallest of the 3 responded, his words sharp and questioning. Finn replied calmly, gesturing to Felicity and then pointing toward the direction they were heading. There was a tense moment of silence before the warrior spoke again, this time with a nod. "We can pass," Finn murmured to Felicity, "but we must give them something in exchange." "I have nothing of value," she whispered back, panic rising. "I do," he assured her. From his saddlebag he extracted a small pouch and a folded blanket, which he presented to the warriors with a respectful nod. The leader examined the offerings, tobacco, and a finely woven trade blanket before nodding his acceptance. The warriors parted, allowing them passage, but their eyes followed the pair as they rode slowly past. Felicity kept her gaze forward, fighting the urge to look back. Only when they had rounded a bend in the pass did she release the breath she'd been holding. "That was terrifying," she admitted. "They're just protecting their territory," Finn replied. "No different than any rancher guarding his property line." "Except most ranchers don't carry war paint and arrows," Felicity pointed out. Finn chuckled. "Fair point. But we're through the worst of it now. Another half hour and we'll be out of the pass." True to his word, they emerged from the rocky corridor into open country, just as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon. Before them stretched a vast plain, and in the distance, Felicity could make out a thin plume of dust rising into the sky. "The stagecoach," Finn said, pointing. "Told you we'd catch them." Hope surged through Felicity as she saw the evidence of the vehicle carrying her trunk and savings. "How long until we reach them? if we ride hard before they make camp for the night." He patted the horse's neck. "What do you say, Thunder? Got another gallop in you?" The horse snorted as if in answer, and Finn urged him into a run. They raced across the open plain, the wind whipping tears from Felicity's eyes as they flew over the hard, packed earth. She found herself laughing again, exhilarated by the speed and the promise of reclaiming what she'd lost. The sun was a crimson ball hanging just above the horizon when they finally spotted the stagecoach itself, preparing to stop for the night beside a small creek. Finn slowed Thunder to a walk as they approached. "Let me do the talking," he advised as they neared the camp. "Jasper Wells and I have history." "What kind of history?" Felicity asked, suddenly concerned. Finn's expression hardened slightly. "The kind where he knows better than to cross me." Before she could question him further, a shout went up from the camp. A burly man with a graying beard strode forward, a shotgun held loosely in his hands. "That's far enough," he called. "State your business." Finn raised his hand in greeting. "Evening, Jasper. Been a while." The stagecoach driver squinted in the fading light, then lowered his weapon slightly. "Montgomery, what in tarnation are you doing out here? Returning something you left behind in Silver Creek," Finn replied, helping Felicity dismount. "Or rather, someone." Jasper's face darkened as he recognized Felicity. "The schoolmarm. Look, lady, I told you schedule. Can't be waiting around for every passenger to get their affairs in order." "My affairs, as you put it, included my trunk containing everything I own," Felicity said, finding her voice. "Including the remainder of my fare to Tuxen." "Which you'll return to her now," Finn added, his tone pleasant but with an unmistakable edge. "Along with her trunk." Jasper's eyes darted between them. "Now see here, Montgomery, I'd rather not have this conversation in front of your passengers," Finn interrupted smoothly. "Wouldn't reflect well on the stage line, would it? A lady's belongings misplaced." The driver scowled but gestured toward the stagecoach. "Trunk still tied on top. Nobody's touched it. And her money," Finn pressed. "Didn't touch that neither," Jasper grumbled. "Was gonna turn it in at the Tuxen office." "How conscientious of you," Finn remarked dryly. "I'll just help Miss Pendleton retrieve her things then." The passengers, a middle-aged couple, a young man in a city suit, and an elderly woman, watched curiously as Finn untied the trunk from the coach's roof and carried it to the ground. Felicity quickly located the hidden compartment where she'd stored her money, relief washing over her when she found the small cloth pouch still containing her $70. "Everything accounted for?" Finn asked quietly. She nodded, tucking the pouch securely into her bodice. "Yes, thank you." "Now what?" Jasper demanded. "You expecting me to take her on without paying the full fare up front? That ain't how it works." "Actually," Felicity interjected before Finn could respond, "I've reconsidered my travel plans." The words surprised her as much as everyone else, but as she spoke them, she realized they were true. "I won't be requiring passage on your coach after all," Jasper snorted. "Suit yourself. We leave at first light." He turned and stomped back to the fire where his shotgun rider was preparing a pot of coffee. Finn raised an eyebrow at Felicity. "Reconsidered your travel plans?" She looked up at him, a newfound confidence in her gaze. "I have indeed. It seems I'm already in the company of a far more reliable guide than Mr. Wells." A slow smile spread across Finn's face. "Is that so? And where might this guide be taking you?" "That depends," Felicity replied, feeling oddly bold. "Where were you headed before our paths crossed, Mr. Montgomery?" "Finn," he corrected gently. "And I was making my way to Fort Bowie, then on to Tuxen eventually." "Then it seems we're traveling in the same direction after all." The elderly passenger, who had been watching their exchange with interest, approached them with a kindly smile. "Young lady, may I offer you some supper? We have plenty to share, and it sounds like you've had quite the adventure today." Felicity accepted gratefully, and soon she and Finn were seated by the fire, enjoying a simple meal of beans, bacon, and cornbread. The passengers were curious about their dramatic arrival, and Felicity found herself recounting the day's events, though she carefully omitted their passage through Apache territory, not wanting to alarm the travelers. As night fell completely, the question of sleeping arrangements arose. The elderly woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Hathaway, offered to share her tent with Felicity. "That's very kind of you," Felicity said, "but I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense, dear. It's not proper for a young lady to sleep under the stars without protection." Finn, who had been speaking with the young city man, rejoined them. "Mrs. Hathaway is right. You take her offer. I'll bed down near the horses." After helping Finn secure her trunk near his bedroll, Felicity retired to Mrs. Hathaway's tent. The older woman was full of questions about Felicity's relationship with that handsome young man, and seemed disappointed to learn they were merely traveling companions thrown together by circumstance. "Circumstance often has a way of becoming destiny, my dear," Mrs. Hathaway observed wisely as she settled into her bedroll. "My late husband and I met when his horse threw him practically at my feet. 47 years we had together before the Lord called him home." Felicity smiled politely, but made no reply. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her as she lay in the small tent, replaying the day's events in her mind. She had awoken that morning a solitary woman with a carefully laid plan. Now she found herself adrift, her future uncertain, yet somehow she felt more alive than she had in years. Outside, the desert night came alive with sounds: the distant howl of a coyote, the soft hooting of an owl, the occasional snort of the horses. Through the tent flap, she could see the glow of the dying fire, and, beyond it, the silhouette of Finn as he kept watch, his rifle across his knees. There was something compelling about him that went beyond his obvious physical appeal. He possessed a quiet strength, an integrity that she found increasingly rare in a world where men often measured their worth by what they could take rather than what they could give. Eventually, lulled by the rhythm of Mrs. Hathaway's gentle snoring, Felicity drifted into a dreamless sleep. She awoke to the sound of activity in the camp. Dawn was breaking, the eastern sky painted in delicate shades of pink and gold. When she emerged from the tent, she found Jasper and his shotgun rider already hitching the horses to the stagecoach while the passengers gathered their belongings. Finn stood apart, tending to Thunder. He looked up as she approached, his face breaking into a warm smile that made her heart beat a little faster. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Better than expected," she replied. "And you?" "Well enough." He gestured to her trunk. "I've been thinking about your trunk. It's too heavy for Thunder to carry along with us both." "Oh." Felicity hadn't considered the logistics. "Perhaps I could pay Mr. Wells to deliver it to Tuxen after all." Finn shook his head. "I wouldn't trust Jasper with a sack of flour, let alone your possessions." He glanced toward Fort Bowie's direction. "I have a better idea. Fort Bowie is only half a day's ride. The commander there, Major Ellis, is a fair man. He sometimes allows civilians to send items with the military supply wagons. They run to Tuxen weekly." "Would he do that for a stranger?" "He would if I ask," Finn said with confidence. "I've guided for him before, helped track some deserters last year." Felicity considered the proposal. "That sounds reasonable. But what about us? How will we travel to Tuxen?" "Well, that depends on how much of a hurry you're in," Finn replied. "The direct route would take us about 4 days on horseback, but there's another way following the San Pedro River." Takes longer, about a week, but it's easier traveling. Good water, game for hunting, and some of the prettiest country you'll ever see." There was an eagerness in his voice that made Felicity suspect he was hoping she'd choose the longer route. The sensible part of her knew she should get to Tuxen as quickly as possible. The school term would be starting soon, and she needed to prepare. But another part, a part that had been dormant for too long, yearned for adventure. "The San Pedro route sounds lovely," she found herself saying. "If you're certain it won't inconvenience you." His smile widened. "No inconvenience at all. Been wanting to see that country again." The stagecoach passengers were boarding now. Mrs. Hathaway paused to embrace Felicity and whisper, "He's a good man, dear. I can tell. Follow your heart." Before Felicity could respond, the older woman had climbed into the coach with surprising agility for her age. Jasper gave them a curt nod as he mounted the driver's box. "Safe travels, Montgomery. Keep an eye out for Apache. Heard they've been restless lately." "I'll manage," Finn replied evenly. Safe journey to Tuxen. They watched as the stagecoach pulled away, raising a cloud of dust in the morning light. When it had disappeared from view, Finn turned to Felicity with a curious expression. "Not having second thoughts, are you? You could still catch them if you ran." She shook her head firmly. "No second thoughts, though I am wondering what I've gotten myself into, agreeing to spend a week in the wilderness with a man I barely know." Finn laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Fair concern. For what it's worth, I promise to be a gentleman." His expression grew more serious. "I know this isn't conventional, Felicity. If you're uncomfortable at any point, we can adjust our plans." The consideration in his voice touched her. "I appreciate that, and I trust you, Finn. I'm not entirely sure why, but I do." "Then let's get moving. We should reach Fort Bowie by midday if we make good time." They packed quickly, securing Felicity's carpetbag to Thunder's saddle. With Finn's help, she mounted, and he swung up behind her. As they set off across the desert, Felicity felt a curious sense of freedom. For the first time in years, she had deviated from her carefully planned path, and the uncertainty ahead felt more like promise than peril. The ride to Fort Bowie took them through increasingly rugged terrain. Finn pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the land's history, from ancient native settlements to more recent conflicts between the Apache and the U.S. Army. He spoke with respect for both sides, neither romanticizing nor demonizing either culture. "The tragedy," he told her as they skirted a canyon where a battle had occurred 2 years earlier, "is that there's good and bad on both sides, but fear makes enemies of people who might otherwise find common ground." "You don't speak like most men I've encountered in the territories," Felicity observed. "You've clearly had some education." Finn was quiet for a moment before responding. "My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father. She made sure I read everything I could get my hands on, even after we moved to the ranch. Said a man's mind needs cultivation same as any field." "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was," he agreed softly. "Would have liked you, I think. She had no patience for pretense or cruelty, but endless patience for learning and kindness." They crested a hill, and suddenly Fort Bowie came into view in the valley below, a collection of adobe and wooden buildings surrounded by a wooden palisade, the American flag fluttering above the central compound. "Not what you expected?" Finn asked, noting her expression. "It's smaller than I imagined," Felicity admitted. "Most forts out here are big enough to defend, small enough to maintain with limited men and supplies." He guided Thunder down the slope toward the fort's entrance. "Stay close to me when we're inside. Army posts can be rough places." At the gate, they were stopped by a young sentry who straightened visibly when he recognized Finn. "Mr. Montgomery, didn't expect to see you back so soon." "Hello, Jenkins. Major Ellis around?" "Yes, sir, in his office. Should I tell him you're here, if you wouldn't mind? And mention I have a lady with me who needs assistance." The sentry hurried off, and Finn helped Felicity dismount. Her legs were stiff from the long ride, and she stumbled slightly, grateful for Finn's steadying hand at her elbow. "Sorry about that," she murmured, embarrassed. "No need to apologize. Even experienced riders get saddle stiff." His hand lingered on her arm a moment longer than necessary before he released her. "Let me get your trunk down while we wait." Felicity was acutely aware of the curious glances from soldiers and civilian workers as they passed through the fort's central yard. A woman not obviously a laundress or camp follower was clearly an unusual sight. They didn't wait long before a tall, distinguished man with iron gray hair and a neatly trimmed mustache emerged from the headquarters building. He strode toward them with military precision, but his stern expression softened when he reached them. "Montgomery, Jenkins said you were back. Didn't expect to see you until the winter supply run." His gaze shifted to Felicity, and he removed his hat with a courteous nod. "Madam, Major Ellis, may I present Miss Felicity Pendleton. Miss Pendleton, Major William Ellis, commander of Fort Bowie. A pleasure, Miss Pendleton." The major's manner was formal but kind. "What brings you to our remote outpost?" Finn explained their situation, from Felicity being left behind by the stagecoach to their plan to travel to Tuxen via the San Pedro River route. Major Ellis listened attentively, occasionally glancing between them with barely concealed interest. "I'd be happy to arrange for Miss Pendleton's trunk to be transported to Tuxen on our next supply wagon," the major said when Finn finished. "It leaves in 3 days. I can even send a message ahead to the school board informing them of her delay if you'd like." "That would be most appreciated," Felicity said gratefully. "Of course." The major turned to Finn. "You'll stay the night, I hope. Give your horse a proper rest before setting out again. We can offer Miss Pendleton the nurse's quarters. She's away treating settlers near Dragoon Springs." Finn looked to Felicity for her decision. She nodded, relieved at the prospect of a real bed and perhaps even a bath before continuing their journey. "Excellent," Major Ellis said. "I'll have Jenkins show Miss Pendleton to her quarters. Montgomery, walk with me. I'd like your thoughts on some reports we've received from the eastern ranges." Felicity found herself reluctantly parting from Finn as the young sentry led her to a small but tidy room in the officers' quarters. Another soldier brought her trunk, and a kindly middle-aged woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Collins, the major's housekeeper, informed her that a bath could be prepared if she wished. "That would be heavenly," Felicity admitted. While waiting for the bath to be ready, she unpacked a clean dress from her trunk, relieved to find her possessions undisturbed. The simple act of changing into fresh clothing after her bath made her feel human again after the dusty journey. As evening approached, Mrs. Collins returned to escort her to the officers' mess for dinner. Felicity felt a flutter of anticipation at the thought of seeing Finn again, then chided herself for the schoolgirl reaction. Their relationship was one of convenience and circumstance, nothing more. The officers' mess was a long room with a central table that could seat about 20. When Felicity entered, the half-dozen officers present rose to their feet, an unexpected courtesy that made her blush. Major Ellis gestured her to a seat beside him, with Finn across the table. Finn had clearly taken the opportunity to clean up as well. His hair was damp, his face freshly shaved except for his neatly trimmed mustache. He changed into a clean shirt, and without the dust of the trail, he looked younger and even more handsome. Dinner was simple but abundant: roast beef, potatoes, cornbread, and stewed apples for dessert. The conversation flowed easily, with the officers eager to hear news from beyond their isolated post. Felicity spoke of conditions in Silver Creek, and what she knew of Tuxen from her correspondence with the school board. Finn was quieter than usual, contributing occasionally, but seeming content to observe. Several times, Felicity caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. After dinner, Major Ellis invited them to join him on the headquarters porch for coffee. The night was cool and clear, the stars impossibly bright above the desert landscape. "Miss Pendleton tells me you're headed to Tuxen to take up a teaching position," the major said, settling into a chair with his pipe. "Yes, at the new territorial school," Felicity confirmed. "They're establishing proper education for all children, regardless of background." "A noble endeavor," Ellis said approvingly. "The territories need civilization as much as they need protection." He glanced at Finn. "Though some of us find the constraints of civilization more challenging than others, eh, Montgomery?" Finn smiled faintly. "I appreciate civilization in moderate doses, Major, like strong whiskey." Ellis laughed. "Fair enough. Though I suspect Miss Pendleton might be the kind of civilization a man could develop a taste for." Felicity felt her cheeks warm at the implication, and Finn's expression grew carefully neutral. "Miss Pendleton's future students are fortunate indeed," he said diplomatically. The conversation moved to safer topics: the weather, the condition of the trails, news from the east. As the evening wore on, Felicity found herself growing tired, the events of the past 2 days catching up with her. "I should retire," she said during a lull in the conversation. "It's been quite an adventure since yesterday morning." "Of course," Major Ellis said, rising. "Mrs. Collins will have prepared your room. Montgomery, we'll see you at breakfast before you depart." "Yes, sir," Finn confirmed, also standing. "I'll walk Miss Pendleton to her quarters, if that's acceptable." The major nodded with a knowing smile that made Felicity wonder just what he was thinking about their unusual arrangement. They walked in silence through the quiet fort, most of the soldiers already retired to their barracks. When they reached the door to her temporary quarters, Felicity turned to Finn. "Thank you for everything you've done," she said softly. "I'm not sure what would have become of me if you hadn't appeared when you did." "You'd have managed," he replied with confidence. "You strike me as a woman who finds a way no matter the obstacles." The compliment pleased her more than it should have. "Still, I'm grateful for your help. And your company." In the lantern light, his eyes seemed darker, more intense. "The company has been my pleasure, Felicity." The way he said her name sent a small shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool night air. They stood there a moment longer, something unspoken hovering between them. "Good night, Finn," she finally said, breaking the spell. "Good night. Sleep well." He tipped his hat and waited until she was safely inside before walking away. Alone in her room, Felicity sat on the edge of the narrow bed, her thoughts in turmoil. She had known Finnian Montgomery for barely 2 days, yet she felt drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. It wasn't merely gratitude, though she certainly owed him that. There was something more: a connection, a sense of recognition that transcended their brief acquaintance. "This is madness," she whispered to herself. "Complete madness." Yet as she prepared for bed, she couldn't help but look forward to tomorrow's journey, and the days that would follow, days spent in his company, learning more about the enigmatic man who had come to her rescue when she needed it most. Morning came with the sound of reveille and the bustle of soldiers beginning their day. Felicity dressed carefully in her most practical traveling outfit, a sturdy blue skirt and white shirtwaist, with a light jacket for the cool morning air. She repacked her carpetbag with essentials for the journey, leaving most of her belongings in the trunk that would follow by wagon. At breakfast in the officers' mess, She found Finn already seated with Major Ellis, deep in conversation over a map spread between their coffee cups. Both men rose as she approached. "Good morning, Miss Pendleton," the Major greeted her. "I trust you slept well." "Very well, thank you," she replied, taking the seat Finn held for her. "Your hospitality has been most appreciated." "Our pleasure entirely. It's not often we have such charming company at the fort." Ellis rolled up the map. "I've been showing Montgomery the latest reports of activity along your route. Nothing concerning, but it's best to be informed." "We'll stick to the river valley," Finn assured her, passing a plate of biscuits. "Plenty of water and game, good visibility." They ate quickly, aware of the long day's ride ahead. After breakfast, Felicity found her trunk already loaded onto a wagon in the fort's yard, tagged for delivery to Tuxen. Major Ellis provided them with additional supplies: jerky, hardtack, coffee, and a small sack of cornmeal. "The river has good fishing," he told Felicity as a soldier helped secure the provisions to Thunder's saddle. "And Montgomery here is one of the best hunters I know. You won't go hungry." "I'm in capable hands, it seems," she replied with a smile. "Indeed you are." The Major lowered his voice slightly. "Montgomery doesn't extend his protection lightly, Miss Pendleton. I've known him 5 years, and I've never seen him with a traveling companion before, certainly not one he crossed Apache territory to rescue." Before Felicity could respond to this revelation, Finn approached, leading Thunder. "Ready to depart when you are." Major Ellis shook Finn's hand firmly. "Safe travels. Try not to antagonize any Apache this time." "No promises," Finn replied with a grin. He helped Felicity mount, then swung up behind her with practiced ease. They rode out of Fort Bowie under the watchful eyes of the garrison, heading southwest toward the San Pedro River. The morning was perfect for traveling: clear skies, mild temperature, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and desert flowers. "Major Ellis seems to hold you in high regard," Felicity observed once the fort had disappeared behind them. "He's a good man. One of the few Army officers who treats the Apache with some respect," Finn replied. "We've worked together a few times when our interests aligned." He seemed surprised that you were traveling with a companion. Finn was quiet for a moment. "I usually ride alone. It's simpler that way." "Why make an exception for me?" The question had been bothering her since the Major's comment. Truthfully, his voice had a thoughtful quality she hadn't heard before. "I'm not entirely sure. Something about seeing you standing there in Silver Creek, watching that stage disappear. It just seemed wrong to leave you stranded." "So it was pity," she said, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. "No," he said quickly. "Not pity. Maybe recognition of someone at a crossroads, like I've been more times than I can count." They rode in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. The landscape gradually changed as they descended toward the river valley. More vegetation appeared, the harsh desert giving way to grasslands dotted with mesquite and cottonwood trees. By midday, they could hear the river before they saw it, a soft, persistent murmur that promised water and life in the arid land. When they crested a small rise, the San Pedro spread before them, a ribbon of silver winding through a green corridor of trees and brush. "It's beautiful," Felicity breathed, taking in the unexpected oasis. "Wait until you see it up close," Finn said, guiding Thunder down the slope toward the riverbank. "This is one of the few year-round rivers in the territory. Life gathers here: plants, animals, people." They stopped in a small clearing near the water's edge, where a ring of stones indicated previous travelers had camped. Finn dismounted first, then helped Felicity down, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "We'll rest here through the hottest part of the day," he explained, unloading some of their supplies. No sense pushing thunder in this heat, and the fishing's good now. While Finn tended to the horse, Felicity explored the riverbank, marveling at the abundance of life. Butterflies danced among wildflowers, birds called from the cottonwoods, and small fish darted in the clear shallows. After the desolation of Silver Creek and the harsh desert crossing, the river valley seemed almost magical in its vitality. Finn joined her with a simple fishing line and hook. "Hungry for fresh fish?" "That sounds wonderful," she replied. "Can I help? You can gather some wood for a small fire. Nothing green, dry branches only. We don't want to make more smoke than necessary." Felicity set about collecting fallen branches, while Finn settled on a rock overlooking a deeper pool in the river. His patience and focus as he fished reminded her of a heron she'd once watched in Boston Harbor, perfectly still until the precise moment to strike. Within 20 minutes, he had caught 3 good-sized fish. Felicity watched with interest as he cleaned them efficiently with his knife, then showed her how to skewer them on green sticks to cook over the small fire she'd helped build. "Where did you learn all this?" she asked as they sat side by side, waiting for the fish to cook. "Necessity, mostly," he replied. "When you live on the move, you either learn how to provide for yourself or you go hungry." He turned the fish to cook evenly. "My father taught me the basics of hunting and fishing. The rest I picked up along the way. And the languages, the Apache words you spoke," a shadow crossed his face. "That came later, after the war." Something in his tone told her not to press further, at least not yet. Instead, she asked about the river and the journey ahead. Their lunch of fresh fish was the best meal Felicity had eaten in months. They sat in companionable silence as they ate, listening to the river's gentle flow and the occasional call of birds overhead. "Tell me about the school in Tuxen," Finn said as they finished. "What made you decide to become a teacher?" Felicity smiled, warming to a subject close to her heart. "My mother was a teacher before she married. Books and learning were always sacred in our home. After she died, teaching seemed the natural path, a way to honor her memory and to make my own contribution. And Tuxen specifically, I saw an advertisement in a Boston newspaper. The Arizona Territory was establishing public schools and seeking qualified teachers willing to relocate. The idea of building something new, of bringing education to children who might otherwise go without, it appealed to me." She laughed softly. "Also, I must admit, the promise of adventure didn't hurt. Boston had become suffocating after my parents died. Too many memories." Finn asked perceptively. "Yes, and too many well-meaning relatives with opinions about what a young woman in my position should do." She sighed. "They all thought I should marry my father's colleague, a man 20 years my senior who needed a housekeeper more than a wife." "So you fled 3,000 miles instead," Finn observed with a hint of admiration. "That took courage." "Or desperation," she countered, echoing his words from their first conversation. "Sometimes they're the same thing." Finn nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Either way, Tuxen's children will benefit from Boston's loss." The simple compliment warmed her more than the afternoon sun. They packed up their small camp and continued following the river southward. The terrain was easier here, allowing Thunder to maintain a steady pace without strain. As they rode, Felicity found herself growing increasingly comfortable with Finn's proximity. The initial awkwardness of sharing a saddle had given way to a natural rhythm, their bodies moving in harmony with the horse's gait. Occasionally, his arm would brush against hers as he adjusted the reins, sending an unexpected flutter through her chest. Late in the afternoon, they passed the ruins of what appeared to be an ancient settlement, stone foundations partially reclaimed by the desert. "Hohokam," Finn explained when she asked. They lived here for centuries, built canals, farmed the valley, disappeared long before Europeans arrived. What happened to them? No one knows for certain. Drought, perhaps. Conflict with other tribes. The desert keeps its secrets. He guided Thunder around a particularly well-preserved stone circle. The Apache believe their spirits still watch over these places. You believe that? Felicity asked, curious about his personal beliefs. Finn considered the question seriously. I believe there's more to this world than what we can see and touch, whether it's spirits of the departed or something else entirely. I've seen enough to know our understanding has limits. They continued until dusk approached, finally stopping in a protected bend of the river where tall cottonwoods provided natural shelter. Finn helped Felicity dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. "This is a good spot to camp," he said, his voice slightly rougher than usual. "Sheltered, good water, plenty of deadwood for a fire." While Finn unsaddled Thunder and set up their camp, Felicity gathered firewood as she had earlier. They worked efficiently together, as if they'd been traveling companions for years rather than days. After a simple dinner of jerky, hardtack, and the last of the fish, they sat by the fire as darkness settled over the valley. The night was alive with sounds: crickets, frogs from the riverbank, the occasional distant howl of a coyote. "Will you tell me more about yourself?" Felicity asked, watching Finn's face in the flickering firelight. "You know my story, but yours remains something of a mystery." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. "Not much to tell that's worth hearing." "I doubt that very much," she countered. "Major Ellis clearly respects you. The Apache let you pass through their territory. You speak multiple languages and survive in this wilderness as easily as I walk down a city street. There's clearly a story there." Finn was silent for so long that Felicity thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and contemplative. "I grew up on that horse ranch in Missouri, as I told you. When the war came, I was 16, too young to enlist properly but old enough to lie about my age." He stared into the flames, fought for the Union, saw things no boy should see. "When I came home in '65, both my parents had died of cholera." "I'm so sorry," Felicity said softly. He acknowledged her sympathy with a slight nod. The ranch had been neglected, couldn't manage it alone, and didn't have money to hire help. Sold it to a neighbor and headed west with nothing but Thunder and my Army revolver. And then drifted. Worked cattle drives, scouted for wagon trains, hunted buffalo for the railroad camps until I couldn't stomach the waste anymore. His expression darkened. "Did some things I'm not proud of." Eventually found my way to Arizona Territory and discovered I had a knack for navigating places others found dangerous. "Is that when you learned Apache?" "Partly. Got captured once, about 6 years back. Instead of killing me, the chief decided I might be useful. I spent 3 months with them, learning their ways, their language. When they finally let me go, I had a better understanding of their perspective." Felicity tried to imagine Finn as a captive, learning rather than fighting against his circumstances. It spoke volumes about his character. "And now you carry mail and guide travelers." "Among other things," he said, the same vague answer he'd given before. "I go where I'm needed, do what work comes my way. It's a free life, if sometimes a lonely one." The admission of loneliness surprised her. Finn Montgomery struck her as self-sufficient, a man comfortable in his solitude. Yet there was vulnerability in his confession that touched her deeply. "Thank you for sharing that with me," she said quietly. He looked up from the fire, his eyes meeting hers with unexpected intensity. "You're easy to talk to, Felicity. Too easy, perhaps." "Why do you say that?" "Because in a few days we'll reach Tuxen. You'll start your new life as a school teacher and I'll ride on." There was a note of resignation in his voice that made her heart ache. Does it have to be that way? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Finn's expression softened. What other way could it be? You have plans, dreams, a purpose. I'm just a drifter with a checkered past and uncertain future. You're selling yourself short, Felicity protested. You have skills, intelligence, integrity. You could build a life anywhere you chose. Maybe. He didn't sound convinced. But the question is whether I'd be welcome to build it alongside someone like you. The implication hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Felicity's heart raced as she realized they were no longer speaking hypothetically. "I think," she said carefully, "that would depend entirely on whether you wish to." Finn held her gaze across the firelight, something unspoken passing between them. Then he broke the connection, standing suddenly. "It's getting late. You should rest. I'll take first watch." Felicity wanted to press the issue, to force him to acknowledge what was developing between them, but something in his posture, a careful distance, told her the moment had passed. She arranged her bedroll near the fire and settled in, watching as Finn moved to sit with his back against a cottonwood, rifle across his knees, his attention focused on the darkness beyond their camp. Sleep came fitfully that night, her dreams filled with images of Finn riding away while she called after him, her voice lost in the desert wind. Dawn broke with a chorus of birdsong and the gentle murmuring of the river. Felicity opened her eyes to find Finn already awake, tending a small fire where coffee was brewing in a battered tin pot. "Morning," he greeted her, his manner casual, as if their charged conversation of the previous night had never occurred. "Sleep well." "Well enough," she replied, sitting up and smoothing her hair. "Did you sleep at all? A few hours. I'm used to short nights." He poured coffee into a tin cup and offered it to her. "We should reach the old mission by nightfall. Better shelter there than sleeping rough again." They ate a quick breakfast of hardtack softened in coffee, then broke camp efficiently. As Finn helped her mount, Felicity noticed a new restraint in his manner, his hands barely touching her waist, his body held slightly away from hers once he was seated behind her. The day's journey followed the river's meandering path southward. The terrain grew more varied, with occasional rocky outcroppings providing vantage points over the valley. Finn pointed out tracks in the soft earth near the river deer, coyote, once even the distinctive print of a mountain lion. Their conversation remained pleasant, but impersonal throughout the morning, Finn sharing knowledge of the land and its inhabitants, Felicity asking questions about what she observed. The easy intimacy of the previous days seemed to have retreated behind a wall of polite distance. By midday, Felicity's frustration with the situation had reached its limit. When they stopped to water thunder and eat a simple lunch, she decided to confront the issue directly. "Have I offended you in some way?" she asked as Finn handed her a piece of jerky. He looked genuinely surprised. "Of course not. Why would you think that? You've barely spoken 10 words together all morning, and you're treating me like I might break if you touch me." She met his gaze directly. "If last night's conversation made you uncomfortable, it's not that," he interrupted, then sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's just, I shouldn't have said what I did. It wasn't fair to you." "Shouldn't have said what exactly?" Felicity pressed. "That you might want to build a life alongside someone like me." "Why is that unfair?" Finn paced a few steps away, then turned back to her. "Because I have nothing to offer a woman like you, Felicity. No home, no prospects, no stability. Just a horse, a rifle, and a reputation that's mixed at best." "Perhaps you should let me decide what I value in a man," she replied steadily. "Rather than assuming I share the conventional priorities of Boston society." "And what do you value?" he asked quietly. Felicity took a deep breath. Honesty, courage, kindness to those in need, intelligence. The willingness to see beyond appearances to what truly matters. She took a step closer to him. All qualities you've demonstrated since the moment you found me crying in Silver Creek. Finn stood very still, his expression a complex mixture of hope and hesitation. Felicity, I'm not asking for promises, she continued. We've known each other only a few days, but I am asking that you not withdraw from me because you've decided in advance what I want or need. He studied her face for a long moment, as if searching for something. Whatever he saw there seemed to resolve his internal conflict. His shoulders relaxed, and the warmth returned to his eyes. You're unlike any woman I've ever met, he said softly. I'll take that as a compliment, she replied with a small smile. It was meant as one. He closed the distance between them, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. I apologize for pulling away. Old habits are hard to break. The touch of his hand sent warmth spreading through her. Which habits are those? Expecting the worst. Protecting myself by keeping people at a distance. His thumb traced her jawline gently. Being afraid to want something I might lose. Felicity's heart raced at his nearness, at the vulnerability in his admission. And what is it you're afraid to want, Finn? Instead of answering with words, he bent his head and kissed her a gentle, questioning kiss that asked permission even as it was given. Felicity responded without hesitation, her hands coming up to rest on his chest as she returned the kiss with growing confidence. When they finally parted, Finn rested his forehead against hers, his breathing slightly uneven. That answers your question. Eloquently, she whispered, a smile blooming on her lips. He kissed her again, deeper this time, his arms encircling her waist to draw her closer. Felicity felt as though something long dormant within her had suddenly awakened a capacity for passion she had never fully acknowledged. The distant cry of a hawk finally broke the spell. Finn reluctantly released her, though he kept hold of her hand. We should continue if we want to reach the mission by nightfall. Yes, I suppose we should, Felicity agreed, though part of her wished they could remain in this moment indefinitely. As they prepared to resume their journey, the awkward distance of the morning was replaced by a new awareness, a current of anticipation that made every accidental touch, every shared glance, vibrate with meaning. When Finn helped her mount Thunder, his hands lingered at her waist, and once seated behind her, he held her closer than before, one arm securely around her middle. Felicity leaned back slightly into his chest, enjoying the solid warmth of him. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythmic movement of the horse beneath them and the peaceful sounds of the river valley creating a sense of intimacy within their shared journey. Tell me about the mission we're heading to, Felicity finally said, curious about their destination. San Xavier del Bac, Finn replied. Spanish missionaries built it nearly 100 years ago. It's mostly abandoned now, though a caretaker still lives there, an old Tohono O'odham man named Manuel. He welcomes travelers in exchange for supplies or news. Is it safe? One of the safest places in the territory. The local tribes consider it sacred ground, even though they don't share the Christian faith. Bandits avoid it for the same reason too many superstitions about robbing holy places. As the afternoon progressed, the river valley widened and the vegetation grew more lush. They began to see evidence of previous human habitation, old irrigation channels, the occasional stone foundation of a long-abandoned dwelling. The sun was low in the western sky when they finally caught sight of the mission, a white structure rising from the landscape like a mirage, its twin towers silhouetted against the deepening blue of the eastern horizon. It's beautiful, Felicity breathed as they approached. Wait until you see inside, Finn replied. The Spanish didn't spare any effort, even out here in the wilderness. As they rode into the mission's courtyard, an elderly man emerged from a small adobe building adjacent to the main church. His deeply lined face broke into a welcoming smile as he recognized Finn. Montgomery, it has been too long, my friend, he called in accented English. Manuel, Finn greeted him warmly, dismounting and helping Felicity down. Good to see you well. This is Miss Felicity Pendleton. The old man bowed slightly. Welcome to San Xavier, Senorita. Any friend of Montgomery is welcome here. Thank you for your hospitality, Felicity replied, charmed by the caretaker's courtly manners. Manuel insisted on showing them to their accommodations, simple but clean rooms in what had once been the missionaries' quarters. He promised a hot meal and invited them to explore the church while he prepared it. The interior of the mission church took Felicity's breath away. Despite years of neglect, the painted murals, gilded altars, and intricate statuary retained much of their original beauty. Sunlight streamed through high windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the golden beams. I never expected to find something so magnificent out here, she said softly, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. Finn watched her reaction with pleasure. The Spanish believed beauty served God's purpose, even in the remotest frontier. They built to last and to inspire. They wandered through the church, Finn occasionally explaining the significance of a particular symbol or statue. In a small side chapel, Felicity paused before a painting of the Madonna and Child, struck by the tenderness in the mother's expression. My mother would have loved this place, she said, a bittersweet memory surfacing. She always said true faith reveals itself in beauty and compassion, not fear and rigid rules. A wise woman, Finn observed. Is that what you believe as well? Felicity considered the question. I believe in a God who values kindness above dogma, yes, and in the inherent worth of every soul, regardless of their origin or circumstances. She glanced at him. What about you? Do you have faith in anything beyond what you can see and touch? Finn was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the painted Madonna. I've seen too much cruelty in God's name to trust organized religion, he finally said. But out here, under the endless sky, watching life persist against all odds, yes, I believe in something greater than ourselves. Something that connects all living things in ways we barely understand. The honesty of his answer touched her deeply. Here was a man who had clearly thought about the great questions of existence, who had formed his own understanding of the world based on experience rather than received wisdom. A practical spirituality, she remarked, fitting for a man who lives by his wits in the wilderness. He smiled at her perceptiveness. I suppose it is. Manuel called them to dinner, which proved to be a simple but delicious stew of rabbit, chilies, and corn, accompanied by fresh tortillas. The old caretaker was a natural storyteller, regaling them with tales of the mission's history and the changing fortunes of the surrounding lands. After the meal, Manuel excused himself to attend to his evening prayers, leaving Finn and Felicity alone in the courtyard. The night was clear and mild, the sky a vast canopy of stars brighter than any Felicity had seen before. It's overwhelming, she said, gazing upward. Makes one feel rather insignificant, or part of something immense, Finn countered, standing close beside her. Depends on how you look at it. Felicity turned to face him, emboldened by the day's developments. And how do you look at it, Finn? His eyes, reflecting the starlight, searched hers. I'm beginning to see possibilities I'd stopped believing in. Such as, she prompted softly. Such as the chance that a drifter with a complicated past might have something to offer a remarkable woman. He took her hand, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. That two people from different worlds might find common ground under these same stars. Felicity's heart quickened at his words. "I think those possibilities are worth exploring, don't you?" In answer, Finn drew her gently into his arms and kissed her a kiss filled with promise and growing certainty. Felicity responded eagerly, her arms encircling his neck as she pressed closer to him. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Finn kept her within the circle of his arms. "Felicity, I need you to understand something. What's happening between us, it's not something I take lightly." "Nor do I," she assured him, "despite what my behavior might suggest." A smile touched his lips. "Your behavior suggests only that you know your own mind and heart. It's one of the things I admire about you." "One of the things," she teased. "What are the others? Your courage, your kindness, your curiosity about the world." His expression grew more serious. "The way you see beauty in unexpected places. The way you listen to my story without judgment." Each word was like a gift, warming her from within. "I think we may be in danger of becoming quite fond of each other, Mr. Montgomery." "I believe we may have passed that point already, Miss Pendleton," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. A cool breeze stirred the courtyard, reminding them of the lateness of the hour. Reluctantly, they parted, Finn walking Felicity to the door of her small room. "Sleep well," he said, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "We have another long day of riding tomorrow." "Good night, Finn." She touched his cheek briefly before slipping inside, her heart lighter than it had been in years. Alone in her room, Felicity sat on the narrow bed, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions she was experiencing. 4 days ago, she had been a solitary woman with a carefully planned future. Now that future seemed to be reshaping itself around the unexpected presence of Finnian Montgomery in her life. Was she being reckless? Perhaps. But as she prepared for bed in the quiet of the mission, Felicity felt more certain of her path than she had in a very long time. Morning arrived with the gentle tolling of the mission bell, calling Manuel to his devotions. Felicity dressed quickly and found Finn already in the courtyard, helping the old caretaker repair a section of adobe wall. "Good morning," he greeted her, his smile warming his eyes. "Manuel's teaching me the proper way to mix adobe. Apparently, I've been doing it wrong all these years." "The young always think they know better," Manuel said with good-natured scolding. "But the old ways endure for a reason." After a breakfast of cornmeal porridge sweetened with honey, they prepared to depart. Manuel insisted on blessing their journey, making the sign of the cross over them both despite Finn's mild embarrassment. "The desert has many dangers," the old man said seriously. "A blessing never hurts, even for those who doubt." They rode out as the sun cleared the eastern mountains, the mission gleaming white behind them. The day promised to be warmer than the previous ones, the spring heat beginning to assert itself. "How much farther to Tuxen?" Felicity asked as they followed the river southward. 2 more days at our current pace," Finn replied. "We'll reach the settlement at San Augustine by tonight, then Tuxen by tomorrow evening." Felicity nodded, a mixture of anticipation and regret washing over her. Their journey was nearing its end, and with it, this interlude of discovery and growing intimacy. Soon she would need to take up her responsibilities as a teacher, to establish herself in her new community. And Finn, what place would he have in her new life? The question hung unspoken between them as they rode through the morning hours. Around midday, they stopped in a grove of cottonwoods for rest and refreshment. While Thunder drank from the river, Finn spread a blanket in the dappled shade and unpacked their simple meal. "You're quiet today," he observed as they ate, Having second thoughts about our adventure, Felicity shook her head. Not at all, just thinking about what happens when we reach Tuxen. Ah, he set aside his hardtack. That's been on my mind as well. And what have you been thinking? She asked, her heart beating faster. Finn took her hand, his expression earnest. That I'm not ready for this journey to end. That meeting you has changed something fundamental in me, Felicity. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I've spent years avoiding attachments, convincing myself I was better off alone. Now I'm not so certain. Hope bloomed in her chest. What are you saying, Finn? I'm saying I'd like to see where this leads, if you're willing. His eyes held her steadily. I have business that takes me away from Tuxen periodically, but I could make it my base. Find more regular work, perhaps. You do that. Change your whole way of life. The idea both thrilled and concerned her. I wouldn't want you to resent me for clipping your wings. He smiled at the metaphor. My wings won't be clipped, just guided toward a home base worth returning to. He squeezed her hand gently. I'm not proposing marriage, Felicity, not yet. We both need time to be certain. But I am proposing a chance to discover if what we've found these past days can grow into something lasting. Relief and joy flooded through her. I would like that very much, she said softly. More than I can properly express. Finn's smile widened, a weight visibly lifting from his shoulders. He leaned forward to kiss her, a kiss full of promise and new beginnings. When they resumed their journey, there was a lightness between them, a shared anticipation of possibilities to come. Finn pointed out landmarks as they rode ancient petroglyphs carved into rock faces, the distant peaks of mountains with colorful names, a red-tailed hawk circling overhead in the clear blue sky. Late in the afternoon, they spotted riders approaching from the south, 3 men on horseback, moving at a steady pace. Finn tensed slightly, his hand dropping to his revolver. Trouble? Felicity asked, sensing his change in demeanor. Probably not, but best to be cautious. He guided Thunder off the main trail toward a cluster of rocks that offered some cover. Let's see who they are before they see us. From their vantage point, they watched as the riders drew closer. 2 were clearly Mexicans, dressed in the typical clothing of vaqueros. The 3rd, riding slightly ahead, was an American in a black coat despite the heat. Bounty hunters, Finn said grimly, recognition dawning in his eyes. Or at least the one in front is. Jackson Reeves, mean piece of work. Are they looking for someone specific? Felicity asked, a knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. Always are. That's how they earn their living. Finn's expression was unreadable. Let's let them pass. No sense inviting questions. They remained hidden until the riders had disappeared to the north, then cautiously returned to the trail. Finn seemed distracted now, scanning the horizon frequently as they continued their journey. You know that man, the bounty hunter? Felicity finally asked. Finn hesitated before answering. Our paths have crossed. He doesn't distinguish much between legitimate bounties and personal vendettas. Makes him dangerous. Is he looking for you? The question had to be asked, though Felicity dreaded the answer. No, Finn said firmly, but he might be looking for someone I know. Either way, I'd rather avoid him entirely. They pushed on until dusk, making good time despite the brief delay. The settlement of San Augustine appeared as the last light faded, a cluster of adobe buildings surrounding a small plaza, with a modest church at its center. Unlike Fort Bowie or the Mission, San Augustine was a living community, primarily Mexican with some American settlers mixed in. Children played in the twilight while women chatted by the communal well and men gathered outside the cantina. Their arrival attracted curious glances but no hostility. Finn led them to a small inn on the plaza, where he negotiated rooms for the night in fluent Spanish that impressed Felicity with yet another of his hidden talents. The accommodations were simple, but clean, two small rooms with a shared balcony overlooking the plaza. After settling in, they joined the other guests in the inn's dining room for a meal of beans, rice, and tender goat stew. Felicity was aware of the curious glances from the other diners. An unmarried white woman traveling with a rugged frontiersman was clearly an object of speculation. But the innkeeper's wife, a plump, motherly woman named Senora Ortiz, took Felicity under her wing, engaging her in conversation about her journey and her plans in Tucson. "A teacher? How wonderful!" the woman exclaimed when Felicity explained her profession. "My daughter Resita is very smart. Perhaps she could attend your school." "I would be delighted to have her," Felicity replied warmly. "The territorial school is open to all children." After dinner, they stepped out onto the balcony connecting their rooms. The night was alive with the sounds of the settlement, distant music from the cantina, soft conversations in Spanish, a dog barking at some unseen disturbance. "One more day," Finn said quietly, leaning on the railing beside her. "Then you'll be in Tuxen, ready to begin your new life." "Our new chapter," Felicity corrected gently, "if you meant what you said earlier." He turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "I meant every word, but Felicity, there's something you should know before we reach Tuxen." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "My reputation, it's complicated. There are those who respect me like Major Ellis, others who distrust me because I've dealt fairly with the Apache and Mexican communities, and some who—" "Who what?" she prompted when he fell silent. "Who know me from my younger days, when I wasn't always on the right side of the law." He watched her face carefully as he continued. "I never killed anyone who wasn't trying to kill me first, and I never stole from those who couldn't afford the loss. But I've done things I'm not proud of." Felicity absorbed this revelation, measuring it against the man she'd come to know. "Thank you for telling me, for trusting me with your past." Relief flickered across his features. "You're not disturbed by this?" "I'm not naive, Finn. The West is a place where survival sometimes requires difficult choices." She placed her hand over his on the railing. "What matters to me is the man you are now, not the boy you were then." He captured her hand, raising it to his lips. "You continue to surprise me, Felicity Pendleton." "Good," she replied with a smile. "I'd hate to become predictable." Their laughter mingled in the night air, a private moment of connection that felt like a pledge for the future. When Finn finally escorted her to her door, his goodnight kiss lingered with sweet promise. "Sleep well," he murmured against her lips. "Tomorrow, Tuxen." The morning dawned clear and warm, the spring sun already asserting its strength as they prepared to depart San Augustine. Senora Ortiz insisted on providing them with fresh tortillas and dried fruit for their journey, pressing the package into Felicity's hands with motherly concern. "The desert is no place for empty stomachs," she declared. "And you, Senorita, are too thin already." They set off as the settlement was coming to life, vendors setting up stalls in the plaza and shepherds leading their flocks to pasture. The road to Tuxen was more traveled than the river path they had followed previously, with occasional wagons and riders passing in both directions. "We're returning to civilization," Finn observed as they rode. "How does it feel?" "Strange," Felicity admitted. "Part of me is eager to begin my work, to meet my students and colleagues, but another part—" she hesitated, searching for the right words. "Another part has found a freedom in our journey that I'm reluctant to relinquish." Finn's arm tightened slightly around her waist. "The desert has a way of stripping away pretense, of revealing what truly matters. It's why I've remained here despite opportunities elsewhere." "Will you tell me more about those opportunities?" she asked, genuinely curious about the paths he hadn't taken. As they rode through the morning hours, Finn shared stories of his wandering years' offers to become a lawman in Colorado, a ranch foreman in Wyoming, even a guide for wealthy European hunters seeking exotic trophies. "Why did you decline?" Felicity asked when he finished describing a particularly lucrative offer from an English lord. "Each opportunity meant being bound to someone else's expectations," he explained. "After the war, after losing my parents and home, I needed to answer only to myself for a while, to find my own moral compass again." "And have you found it, I mean?" "I believe I have," he said thoughtfully. "Though it points in directions that sometimes puzzle others. I value freedom and honesty above property and position, loyalty to individuals above loyalty to institutions, and mercy above justice when the choice must be made." "Those seem like worthy principles to live by," Felicity observed. "They've served me well enough," he agreed, "though they've occasionally put me at odds with the law as written, if not the law as it should be." They stopped at midday near a small oasis, a spring bubbling from beneath a rocky outcropping, creating a pool surrounded by greenery. While Thunder drank and grazed on the sparse grass, they shared the food Senora Ortiz had provided. "How will the school board view your association with me?" Finn asked suddenly, voicing a concern that had clearly been on his mind. "Teachers are expected to be above reproach, especially female ones." Felicity considered the question seriously. "There will be talk, undoubtedly, but Tuxen isn't Boston. The territories need educators desperately enough that some conventional standards may be relaxed." She smiled at him. "Besides, I don't intend to flaunt our relationship inappropriately. We can be discreet while still seeing each other." Finn seemed relieved by her practical approach. "And if discretion isn't enough, if your position becomes compromised because of me, then we'll face that challenge together," she said firmly. "I won't sacrifice happiness for propriety's sake, Finn. I've seen too many women wither into bitterness following that path." He studied her face, admiration evident in his gaze. "You're a remarkable woman, Felicity Pendleton." "I'm simply a woman who knows her own mind," she replied. "And my mind is quite decided about you, Finnian Montgomery." Their moment of connection was interrupted by the distant sound of approaching horses, multiple riders moving at speed. Finn was instantly alert, helping Felicity to her feet and guiding her toward a cluster of rocks that offered concealment. "Stay here," he instructed, his voice low and urgent. "Don't move until I call for you." Before she could protest, he had slipped away, positioning himself behind a boulder with a clear view of the trail. Felicity's heart raced as she heard the riders draw closer, dust rising in their wake. Through a gap in the rocks, she could see them as they thundered past 5 men, hard-faced and heavily armed. The leader was instantly recognizable as Jackson Reeves, the bounty hunter they had avoided the previous day. The riders reined to a halt at the spring, dismounting to water their horses. They were close enough now that Felicity could hear their conversation. "He can't be far ahead," Reeves was saying, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "That Mexican in San Augustine said a man matching his description passed through this morning." "With a woman," one of the others added. "Blonde, pretty, dressed like an Easterner." "Montgomery always did have an eye for the ladies," Reeves remarked with a crude laugh. "This one sounds fancier than his usual taste, though." Felicity's blood ran cold. They were hunting Finn. But why? He had assured her he wasn't wanted by the law. "Remember, boys," Reeves continued, "Whitfield wants him alive if possible. The bounty's good either way, but there's a bonus for breathing." "What's Montgomery done to get Whitfield so riled up anyway?" asked another rider. "Must be personal." Montgomery shot Whitfield's brother 3 years back, Reeves explained. Claimed it was self-defense and the territorial judge agreed, but Whitfield's got money and a long memory. He's been looking for a legal way to get even ever since. And he found one. Got a judge in Phoenix to issue a warrant based on some old business in Prescott. Probably wouldn't hold up in a proper trial, but we don't need to worry about that. Our job is just to bring him in. Felicity fought to control her breathing, fear for Finn overwhelming her. From her hiding place, she could see him pressed against the boulder, revolver drawn but still holstered. He was outnumbered and outgunned, with nowhere to run without exposing himself. The bounty hunters continued watering their horses, unaware of how close their quarry was. Reeves studied the ground near the spring, his experienced eyes reading the signs. "Fresh tracks," he announced. "2 people, 1 horse. They can't be more than an hour ahead." Panic threatened to overwhelm Felicity. They would be caught, Finn taken or worse, killed if he resisted. And it would be her fault for slowing him down, for insisting on regular rest stops for her comfort. Just as despair was setting in, salvation arrived from an unexpected direction. The sound of a military bugle echoed across the landscape, followed by the distinctive rhythm of a cavalry patrol approaching at a trot. The bounty hunters exchanged alarmed glances. "Army patrol," one muttered. "Heading this way." Reeves scowled. "Mount up. We'll circle around, pick up their trail beyond the patrol's range." He glared at the horizon where dust indicated the approaching soldiers. Damn military, always interfering in civilian business. The bounty hunters mounted quickly and rode off in the opposite direction from the approaching patrol. Felicity sagged against the rocks in relief, her knees weak with the release of tension. Moments later, Finn was at her side, his face grim. "Are you all right?" She nodded, still trembling slightly. "They're looking for you, something about a warrant from Phoenix. I heard." His jaw tightened. Whitfield should have known he'd find a way eventually. "Is it true? What they said about his brother?" Finn nodded curtly. "Frank Whitfield tried to ambush me outside Tuxen 3 years ago. I shot him in self-defense, with witnesses who testified to that effect. His brother, Harold, owns half the businesses in Phoenix and has been trying to get revenge ever since. But if it was self-defense, Harold Whitfield doesn't care about justice, only vengeance." Finn peered cautiously around the rocks. "The cavalry patrol is getting closer. We need to decide quickly, do we avoid them or seek their protection?" Felicity considered their options. "If the warrant is legal, even if based on dubious grounds, wouldn't the military be obligated to arrest you?" "Possibly. Depends on the patrol leader and how they interpret their jurisdiction." He met her eyes directly. "I won't blame you if you want to continue to Tuxen with the patrol. It would be safer for you, and your reputation would remain untarnished." The suggestion that they separate hurt more than she expected. "And what would you do?" "Head into the mountains until I can sort this out legally. I have friends in Tuxen who can help clear this up, but I need time to reach them." Felicity straightened her shoulders, decision made. "We stay together. If these bounty hunters are as unscrupulous as they seem, I'm safer with you than with strangers, even in uniform." Relief and gratitude flickered across his face. "We'll need to leave the main trail, travel cross-country to avoid both the patrol and Reeves' men." They moved quickly, gathering their belongings and mounting thunder. Instead of continuing south toward Tuxen, Finn guided them eastward, toward the mountains that rose purple in the distance. "The Santa Catalinas," he explained as they rode hard across the open desert. "Rough country, but I know it well. We can follow the canyons around to approach Tuxen from the northeast." The cavalry patrol was visible in the distance now, a neat line of blue-coated riders following the main trail. Finn kept them in the shadow of a low ridge, using the terrain to mask their movement until they reached the foothills of the mountains. The landscape changed dramatically as they climbed desert scrub giving way to oak woodland, the air growing cooler as they ascended. Thunder handled the terrain admirably, picking his way up game trails with sure footing despite carrying double. By late afternoon, they had reached a sheltered canyon where a small stream provided water. Finn finally called a halt, helping Felicity dismount. Her legs were stiff from the hard ride, and she stumbled against him, grateful for his steadying hands. "We should be safe here for the night," he said, scanning the canyon walls. "Too many potential approaches for Reeves to watch them all, and the high ground gives us an advantage if they do find us." While Finn secured Thunder and set up a minimal camp, Felicity gathered wood for a small, smokeless fire. The day's events had left her shaken but also strangely exhilarated. There was something oddly liberating about facing danger together, about choosing Finn over the safer path. As darkness fell, they sat close beside their tiny fire, sharing the last of Senora Ortiz's provisions. The night was cooler at this elevation, and Felicity was grateful for the warmth of both the fire and Finn's presence beside her. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "This isn't how I wanted your journey to end, running from bounty hunters, sleeping rough in the mountains." "Don't apologize," she replied, touching his hand. "If anything, I've dragged you into danger. If you'd been traveling alone, you would have outpaced them easily." Finn shook his head. "Reeves was already on my trail. Whitfield must have heard I was in the area." He gazed into the flames. "I should have been more cautious, knowing he still holds a grudge." "What exactly is this warrant for?" They mentioned Prescott. Finn sighed, running a hand through his hair. 3 years ago, before the incident with Frank Whitfield, I was involved in stopping a stagecoach robbery outside Prescott. One of the would-be robbers was Harold Whitfield's cousin, though I didn't know it at the time. The territorial marshal gave me a reward for my assistance. "That hardly sounds like grounds for a warrant," Felicity observed. "It isn't. But Whitfield has likely fabricated evidence suggesting I was actually part of the robbery gang and turned on my accomplices for the reward money." His expression darkened. "With enough money and influence, a man can make the law say whatever he wants it to say. That's outrageous. Surely there must be a way to fight such injustice." "There is, but it requires time and legal help I can't access while being hunted." He took her hand, his expression grave. "Felicity, when we reach Tuxen, you should distance yourself from me until this is resolved. Your position at the school is less important than standing by someone I care for," she interrupted firmly. "Besides, I have connections of my own that might help. My appointment came through the territorial governor's office. Perhaps they could intervene." Finn looked surprised. "You have connections to the governor?" "Not directly," she admitted. "But the education superintendent who hired me, Mr. Safford, is his brother-in-law." He seemed quite invested in bringing qualified teachers to the territory. Hope flickered in Finn's eyes. "That could be significant. Whitfield has influence in Phoenix, but the governor might outrank him, especially in a matter concerning arbitrary warrants." They talked late into the night, formulating a plan for when they reached Tuxen. Finn knew a lawyer there, Joshua Bennett, who had helped him in the past. With Bennett's legal expertise and potentially Felicity's connection to the education superintendent, they might be able to challenge the warrant before Finn ever saw the inside of a jail cell. As the fire burned down to embers, Finn spread their bedrolls side by side. "We should get some rest." Dawn comes early in the mountains. Felicity settled beside him, drawing comfort from his nearness in the cool night air. After a moment's hesitation, Finn wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close against his chest. "For warmth," he murmured, though they both knew it was more than that. Felicity relaxed into his embrace, feeling safer than she had any right to under the circumstances. "Finn," she whispered, "whatever happens in Tuxen, I don't regret meeting you, not for a moment." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Nor I you, Felicity. Whatever comes next, these days with you have been a gift I never expected." Wrapped in each other's arms beneath the vast canopy of stars, they found peace despite the danger that pursued them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, in this secluded canyon, they had found a sanctuary of their own making. Dawn painted the canyon walls with golden light as they prepared to continue their journey. Finn studied the terrain carefully before choosing their path, leading Thunder up a narrow trail that switched back toward the ridge above. "Once we cross the mountains, we'll have a clear view of the Tuxen Valley," he explained as they climbed. "From there, we can assess whether Reeves and his men are waiting along the main approaches." The morning was spent in careful travel through the rugged mountain terrain. Finn frequently dismounted to lead Thunder through particularly difficult sections, always offering Felicity a steadying hand when needed. Despite the circumstances, she found herself appreciating the raw beauty of the landscape, towering rock formations, unexpected wildflowers nestled in crevices, the occasional glimpse of deer or bighorn sheep on distant slopes. By midday, they had reached the summit of a pass that offered a spectacular view of the valley below. Tuxen lay spread before them, a collection of adobe buildings clustered around a central plaza, with scattered ranches and farms extending outward along the Santa Cruz River. Finn produced a small spyglass from his saddlebag and scanned the approaches to the town. "Reeves has men watching the southern road," he reported grimly. "And they're on the western approach as well. Can we avoid them?" Felicity asked. "I believe so. There's a ranch to the northeast, owned by friends of mine, Miguel and Elena Vasquez. They'll give us shelter while I send word to Bennett." They descended carefully, Finn choosing game trails and dry washes that provided cover from any watching eyes. By late afternoon, they had reached the valley floor and were making their way through scattered mesquite toward a modest adobe ranch house with several outbuildings. As they approached, a man emerged from the barn, rifle in hand. When he recognized Finn, his face broke into a welcoming smile. "Montgomery, my amigo." He lowered the rifle and hurried forward. "It has been too long." Finn dismounted and embraced the man warmly. "Miguel, good to see you. This is Miss Felicity Pendleton. We're in need of your hospitality and discretion." Miguel's dark eyes assessed Felicity with respectful curiosity as Finn helped her down from Thunder. "Any friend of Montgomery is welcome in my home," he said in accented but clear English. "Come, Elena will be delighted to have company." Elena Vasquez proved to be a petite, energetic woman with a warm smile and efficient manner. She welcomed Felicity like a long-lost relative, ushering her into the clean, well-ordered ranch house while Miguel and Finn tended to Thunder. "You must be exhausted traveling with this one," Elena said, gesturing toward Finn as the men entered. "He forgets not everyone has his stamina." "I've managed quite well, thank you," Felicity replied with a smile, "though I admit the prospect of a proper meal and bed is very appealing." Elena clicked her tongue sympathetically. "Of course. First, fresh clothes while I heat water for washing." She appraised Felicity's trail-worn outfit. "My sister's things should fit you. She left some dresses here when she married and moved to Sonora." While Felicity gratefully accepted the chance to clean up and change, Finn explained their situation to Miguel in rapid Spanish. The rancher listened gravely, occasionally asking questions that Felicity couldn't follow. By the time she emerged from the small bedroom in a borrowed dress of simple cotton, the men had formulated a plan. Miguel would ride into Tuxen after dark to contact Bennett, while Finn and Felicity remained safely at the ranch. "Bennett is a good man," Miguel assured Felicity as they sat down to a hearty meal of beans, rice, and Alina's fresh tortillas. "Very respected in Tuxen. If anyone can help Montgomery with this legal trouble, it is him. And you're certain Reeves and his men won't look for us here?" Felicity asked, still concerned about bringing danger to their hosts. Miguel grinned. "They would not dare. The Vasquez family has been in this valley since before the Gadsden Purchase. We have many relatives in Tucson who would take offense if bounty hunters violated our home." After dinner, Miguel prepared to leave for town, dressed in his best clothes to avoid unwanted attention. "I will return by morning," he promised, "perhaps with Bennett himself." When Miguel had departed, Alina showed them to a small guest room at the back of the house. "You will be comfortable here," she said, her eyes twinkling with unspoken understanding of their relationship. "No one will disturb you." Left alone, Felicity felt a sudden shyness descend. The room contained a single bed, narrow but certainly large enough for two if they slept close together. Finn seemed equally aware of the implications, standing awkwardly by the window. "I can sleep on the floor," he offered. "Or in the barn with Thunder." Felicity summoned her courage. "That seems unnecessary. We've already shared blankets for warmth in the mountains." His eyes met hers, searching for certainty. "This is different, Felicity. Alina has made assumptions about us that aren't accurate." "Perhaps they should be," she said softly, surprising herself with her boldness. Finn crossed the room slowly, stopping before her. "Felicity, I would never presume." She reached up to touch his face, silencing him. "It's not presumption when it's offered freely. These past days have shown me what truly matters in life, Finn. Conventions and proprieties seem hollow compared to what I feel for you." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "And what do you feel, love?" she whispered, the word both frightening and liberating. "I love you, Finnian Montgomery. Against all reason and wisdom, I have fallen in love with you." The declaration hung in the air between them, irrevocable. For a terrible moment, Finn stood motionless, his expression unreadable. Then he gathered her into his arms, his kiss answering her confession more eloquently than words. When they finally parted, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you too, Felicity Pendleton. God help me. I've tried to be honorable, to think of your future, your reputation. But I can't deny what's in my heart any longer." The night that followed was one of tender discoveries and whispered promises. In Finn's arms, Felicity found a passion she had never imagined possible, matched by a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. Whatever challenges awaited them in Tucson seemed distant and manageable compared to the certainty they had found in each other. Dawn found them still entwined, Finn watching her sleep with wonder in his eyes. When Felicity stirred, his smile was the first thing she saw, filling her with contentment despite their precarious situation. "Good morning," he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Good morning," she replied, suddenly shy in the light of day. "I hope you don't think I'm terribly forward." His laugh was warm and genuine. "I think you're the bravest, most honest woman I've ever known." He kissed her softly. "And I think I'm the luckiest man in the Arizona Territory." They dressed and joined Alina for breakfast, both acutely aware of the knowing smile that played at their hostess's lips. If she had any moral objections to their arrangement, she kept them to herself, treating them with the same warm hospitality as before. Mid-morning brought the sound of approaching horses. Finn tensed, hand moving to his revolver, but Alina peered out the window and relaxed. "It is Miguel," she announced. with Senor Bennett and another man I do not recognize." The visitors proved to be Miguel, Joshua Bennett, a distinguished-looking man in his 50s with a neat beard and wire-rimmed spectacles, and a younger man introduced as Robert Safford, the territorial education superintendent. Felicity was astonished to see her future employer. "Mr. Safford, I wasn't expecting to meet you until I reached Tuxen." Safford, a serious young man with intelligent eyes, smiled slightly. "When Miguel Vasquez tells me one of my newly appointed teachers needs assistance, I pay attention. The Vasquez family has been instrumental in supporting our education initiatives." Bennett, meanwhile, was deep in conversation with Finn, examining a paper he had brought with him, presumably a copy of the warrant. After several minutes of discussion, he addressed the group. "The situation is as we suspected," he announced. "Harold Whitfield has indeed fabricated evidence to secure this warrant. The judge who issued it, Judge Hollister, is known to be in Whitfield's pocket." He turned to Safford. "This is where your assistance becomes crucial, Robert." Safford nodded gravely. "I've already sent a telegraph to my brother-in-law, the governor. He is displeased with Whitfield's abuse of the legal system. A directive has been issued to the Tuxen marshal to disregard the warrant pending review." Relief washed over Felicity. "So Finn is safe?" "From immediate arrest, yes," Bennett confirmed. "But Reeves and his men operate in a gray area. They might still attempt to take Mr. Montgomery by force, claiming they were unaware the warrant had been questioned. Which means we still need to be cautious until the matter is fully resolved," Finn concluded. "How long will that take?" "The governor has called for an inquiry," Safford replied. "Judge Hollister has been summoned to Phoenix to explain his actions. I would estimate 2 weeks before the matter is officially settled." Finn frowned. 2 weeks during which Reeves will be watching for me?" "Not necessarily," Bennett interjected. "I took the liberty of spreading a rumor that you were seen heading toward Sonora." "Reeves and his men left Tuxen this morning, heading south." Miguel grinned. "And I may have mentioned to my cousins at the border that bounty hunters might be crossing illegally. The Mexican authorities take a dim view of armed Americans entering without permission." For the first time since the bounty hunters had appeared, Felicity felt genuine hope that their troubles might be resolved. The network of connections that Finn had established through years of fair dealing was proving more valuable than any official protection. "What does this mean for us now?" she asked, looking between Bennett and Safford. "It means, Miss Pendleton, that you can take up your position at the school as planned," Safford replied. "The term begins in 1 week. As for Mr. Montgomery," he glanced at Finn, "I would suggest remaining with the Vasquez family until we receive confirmation that the warrant has been formally withdrawn." Finn nodded, though Felicity could see his reluctance to be separated from her. "And Felicity's association with me, will that cause problems for her position?" Safford considered the question carefully. "Officially, the school board requires teachers to maintain unimpeachable moral standards. Unofficially," he adjusted his spectacles, "the territory needs qualified educators far more than it needs rigid adherence to Eastern conventions. So long as you conduct yourselves with appropriate discretion in public, I see no reason for concern." The meeting concluded with practical arrangements. Bennett would handle the legal aspects of challenging the warrant, while Safford would ensure Felicity was properly installed in her position at the school. Miguel offered to escort Felicity to Tuxen the following day, where accommodations had been arranged for her at a respectable boarding house. When the visitors had departed, Finn and Felicity found themselves alone in the small garden behind the Vasquez home. The afternoon sun filtered through a grape arbor, casting dappled shadows across the packed earth. "Just one more day," Felicity said softly. and then we'll be separated again." Finn took her hands in his. "Only temporarily. Once this legal matter is resolved, I'll join you in Tuxen." His eyes held her steadily. "If that's still what you want." "It is," she assured him without hesitation. "These past days have shown me more about life and love than all my years before." "I won't give that up, Finn. Not for propriety, not for anyone's expectations but our own." He smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "You continue to amaze me, Felicity Pendleton. When I watched you crying as that stage left without you, I never imagined offering you a ride would change my life so completely. When you tipped your hat and said, 'Ride with me,' I thought you were simply being kind to a woman in distress," she replied, returning his smile. "I had no idea I was meeting the man I would fall in love with. And now," he drew her closer, his expression growing serious, "now that you know the complications that come with loving me," Felicity reached up to touch his face, memorizing its contours. "Now I know that some journeys are worth every challenge they bring, and ours is just beginning." As the sun dipped toward the western mountains, casting long shadows across the Vasquez ranch, Finn and Felicity walked arm in arm through the garden, planning their future together in a territory that was still wild enough to accommodate two souls who had found each other against all odds. The stage might have left without her that day in Silver Creek, but fate and a cowboy with kind eyes and a gentle heart had offered Felicity Pendleton a different journey altogether. One that had led not just to Tuxen, but to love, adventure, and a life more fulfilling than she could have ever imagined when she first set out from Boston. And when Finn kissed her beneath the grape arbor, with Alina watching approvingly from the kitchen window, Felicity knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice when she took his offered hand and decided to ride with him into the unknown. 2 weeks later, as the first cool breeze of evening swept through Tuxen, Felicity stood on the small porch of her new home, a modest adobe cottage on the outskirts of town, provided by the school board for its head teacher. Her first week of classes had been exhausting but deeply satisfying. Her students, a diverse mix of American, Mexican, and native children eager for the education she offered. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention to the road, where a familiar figure approached on a chestnut stallion. Her heart leaped at the sight of Finn, riding tall and free, the warrant against him officially withdrawn the day before. He dismounted in one fluid motion, securing Thunder to the hitching post before approaching the porch. In his hand was a small bouquet of desert wildflowers, gathered on his journey from the Vasquez ranch. "Miss Pendleton," he greeted her formally, removing his hat with a flourish. "I hear you're teaching the children of Tuxen their letters and numbers with great success." "Mr. Montgomery," she replied, matching his playful tone. "I hear you're a free man again, with your name cleared and your reputation restored." "Indeed I am." He climbed the steps to stand before her, presenting the wildflowers with a smile that reached his eyes. "And I find myself at a crossroads once more." "What options are you considering?" she asked, accepting the bouquet with feigned seriousness. "Well," he said thoughtfully, "I've received an offer from the Territorial Marshal's office to serve as a scout and interpreter. Seems my connections with various communities are seen as valuable now that the governor has taken an interest in my case." "That sounds like an excellent opportunity," Felicity observed, hiding her smile. "It is, especially since it would be based here in Tuxen." His eyes held hers steadily. "Which brings me to a question I've been wanting to ask since that night at the Vasquez ranch." Her heart quickened as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object wrapped in soft leather. Unwrapping it carefully, he revealed a simple gold band set with a single small pearl. "It was my mother's," he explained softly. "The only thing I kept when I sold the ranch. I've carried it all these years, never imagining I'd find someone worthy of wearing it until I saw you standing in the dust of Silver Creek, refusing to be defeated even when that stage left you behind." Felicity's vision blurred with tears as Finn dropped to one knee on her small porch, holding the ring up to catch the last golden rays of the setting sun. "Felicity Pendleton, I know we've known each other only a short time, but I've lived enough to recognize something rare and precious when I find it. I love your courage, your compassion, your willingness to see beyond appearances to what truly matters." His voice grew husky with emotion. "Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Joy bubbled up within her, pure and overwhelming. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Finnian Montgomery, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit as if it had been made for her, the pearl glowing softly against her skin. Standing, he gathered her into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, unconcerned with any neighbors who might be watching. When they finally parted, Felicity rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "What will people say? The schoolteacher and the former outlaw?" Finn chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly beneath her ear. "They'll say the same thing Major Ellis said when I told him our news yesterday, that some journeys are meant to be shared, no matter how unlikely the traveling companions might seem at first glance." Tucking her hand in his arm, Finn led Felicity into the small cottage that would soon be their home together. As the first stars appeared in the deepening twilight, they began planning their wedding, a simple ceremony that would unite not just two people, but two different worlds brought together by chance, choice, and the courage to follow their hearts. Outside, thunder nickered softly, settling in beside the small adobe house as if he too had found his home at last. And inside, by the warm glow of lamplight, Felicity and Finn sealed their engagement with a kiss that promised a lifetime of adventures yet to come.